Okay, hi everyone. I want to introduce you to Learneezee Cast, episode 1. So this is our first episode of this Learneezee podcast, and I want to tell you why, we decided to create this podcast. Basically, it's but I want to start first with speaking about learneezee.com because that's what inspired us to come into the podcasting world. Learneezee.com was inspired by myself and my business partner, Jeff Burrows. We're two expats living in Freiburg, Germany, who found that the great learning experience we provide to our English students offline in Freiburg couldn't be replicated when working online for various schools and job boards. And we figured we wanted to provide a safe space for teachers to do what they do best and not worry about all the stress of competing for students and the administrative bureaucracy of working for online schools that only focus on their profits, and generally are not concerned about creating a great learning environment for their students and teachers. We felt compelled to create our own alternative school that would stand as an example of another way to learn online, both for the students and for the teachers. So I know that sounds all well and good, but you might still wonder about the concrete difference between our site and all the other online schools and programs out there. So I'll give you a little bit more information about what specifically makes learneezee.com the better option for learning online. So we want to provide students and teachers a great online community where the focus on learning through fun and creative lessons will be the major focus, right? So we believe this philosophy can help students learn almost anything. So that's our big catchphrase. You can learn almost anything if it's fun and creative. Right now, we have a community of tutors, mostly from the Freiburg area where I live right now and Jeff lives, ready to help students looking to improve their English. Also, they can help you learn German, and some of them are also excellent teachers of Italian as well. We even have a tutor ready to prepare students for college exams in international business and economics. So we also have this ambition of also providing high-level academic courses in the future. But we're not just about high-level economic courses, but we're also looking to add more great teachers of different types of subjects and activities like yoga, possibly dancing, salsa dancing, and we believe that learneezee.com will be that space where you'll find the best team of teachers, and that team hopefully will help you with almost any subject you want to learn. Okay, so what about this podcast? So why do we want to create this podcast? Well, to be honest, this Learneezee Cast will be our opportunity, the community's opportunity to give the learners out there, a way of discovering alternative ways to improve their quality of life through the experiences of the people who will come on the podcast, our guests. We also want them to take advantage of the community that we're trying to build and gather advice from its members about all types of subjects, from advice on living as an expat to how to live a sustainable lifestyle. We hope this can be a resource for self-improvement and personal sustainment and joy. Okay. So at this point, now that I've given you a description of this vision and mission of this Learneezee website, learneezee.com, and the podcast, I want to go to our first guest. So you can see our first guest coming online. And hopefully a regular co-host of the podcast. So I'd like to introduce all of you to Rico Lazo. Rico.
Hey, Patrick, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I really appreciate you being the inaugural guest, and hopefully a future co-host of different episodes of this podcast. And as we are both experienced teachers, I wanted to have a real, quick but interesting discussion with you about your background, and how you started in the world of online teaching and somehow graduated into the world of the gig economy and your future plans. So first, you, as you were my inspiration to get online to teach, and I want to have you tell the audience a little bit about how you got into it. Yeah.
Absolutely, Patrick. Again, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to being a contributing participant and co-host with you.
Okay.
But to answer your question about teaching online,
Mhm.
it all goes back to 2010. I moved to Colombia because my now wife, then fiance,
Yeah.
lived in Colombia. And when I first got to Colombia, I was looking for work.
Mhm.
And because I had taught English in Mexico, in Brazil before, I knew it was something that I could use being a native English speaker. And I got a job at a local school. And it was a great experience. I got to meet a lot of teachers, meet a lot of students, but the schedule was really tough. I was working from 6 a.m. until 10 a.m., Monday through Thursday. And I'd go back in the evenings from 4 p.m. until 8 p.m. So it was a very weird split schedule, and it was very difficult.
Mhm.
And I had the good fortune of my brother, my twin brother, Antonio,
Mhm.
who has a friend, Shannon, who told me about teaching English online.
Oh,
And
cool.
the advantage of teaching online was really twofold.
Mhm.
One, you set your own schedule. So there was no longer the need to be waking up at 6 a.m. necessarily. And it was better pay. I was making almost double the amount of money, I think, initially teaching English online. And
Wow.
so, and as I was preparing to get married, I needed something that was more flexible because I really wanted more time to be able to set my own schedule, do the proper planning. It was a destination wedding for my friends and family. And
Yes.
so I really needed the time to dedicate to getting everything in order to
Yes.
be able to get married. And so that's really led me into teaching online.
Cool.
And because, you and I have been friends for a long time, and I
Yes.
know that you were actually the person who got me into teaching English as well in New York, that I wanted to return the favor
Yeah,
and
I remember that. Yes.
show you the ropes of how to go about teaching English online.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rico. Yeah, we both have been friends for a very long time, and in a sense, we've faced a lot of tough challenges over the years, and that advice when the economy was really tough, to get online and start teaching, was a little bit of a lifeline when it was quite tough after the financial crisis. So I really appreciate that. Were there any negatives to being online as a tutor that you can recall that you faced after getting into it? The positives were clear. Living in Colombia, you had a flexible schedule. You were making a lot more money. But maybe let's not say it was all a bed of roses, so to speak. Any
Yeah,
challenges there?
absolutely. I think with anything, right, there's always the good and the bad. And
Mhm.
so I spoke about the good, but some of the negatives, I think the biggest negative
Mhm.
is probably working remotely and working from home
Mhm.
and not having the camaraderie of having coworkers or having other people that you're working with in a team.
Yeah.
It's very much, self-directed. You've got to, find students, and that can be a challenge as well. That's kind of a negative versus just showing up to class. The students are there.
Mhm.
Um, Not having necessarily a wealth of resources available to you.
Mhm.
You've got to basically develop your own curriculum, which in many ways is a positive, but also can be a challenge and a negative. And so, I think the biggest though for me personally
Mhm.
was just working from home and not having a lot of human interaction
Good point.
for long stretches of time.
Understood. A little bit like what we're going through right now with COVID-19, right?
Very true.
Yeah. So you have to learn how to space out some time for interaction between lessons and so on, so that you can stay in the real world in a sense. So that's also something for the teachers who are looking into being an online tutor. If you want to do it full time, definitely create a schedule. Would that be a tip that you would throw out there, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, for me,
Mm,
I got kind of interested in listening to podcasts and vlogs before the podcast boom happened
yeah.
because you'd have an hour in between, students. You wouldn't have necessarily every day students back to back to back. And in fact, I would schedule breaks because it can be very difficult if you need to run to the restroom or grab a bite to eat
Hmm.
if you have back to back to back classes.
Yeah.
But what I would say the lesson that I learned is
Hmm.
schedule interaction with your friends and family
Hmm.
in those breaks so you don't feel
Cool.
so isolated, because although it is nice to be able to have an hour to eat or to listen to a podcast or even work out, it's still very important that you're regularly scheduling time
Hmm.
to interact with people so that you don't feel so isolated. And I think for me, that's something that I didn't do as well as I should have, I think, in retrospect.
Hmm.
I should have done more of. And that's would be a tip for anybody who's considering teaching English online
Hmm.
versus an in-person situation, is really look for ways that you can have more interaction, not just your students, but
Hmm.
with friends or family or business partners, whatever the case may be.
Exactly. Yeah, great. Yeah, I think yeah, that's great advice. But I want to get into a little bit of the story of how you ended up going from teaching online in Colombia to moving back to Colorado and becoming an administrator of a charter school. Um, um, how is it like in that role? Yeah.
Yeah, so I did mention that I moved to Colombia to get married,
Yep.
and I was really looking forward to staying in Colombia for the foreseeable future. But I had an old college buddy
Yeah. Yeah.
who had started a charter school,
Mhm.
and they were looking for an administrator to help them lead the school.
Oh, cool.
And initially, I had kind of rebuffed their efforts to recruit me because I was completely dedicated to being in Colombia.
Mhm.
But the money was really good, and my wife was open to moving to the United States, and so I decided to take the plunge because it was a really big challenge that I had never taken on before, helping run a charter school.
Mhm.
Uh, and for those of you who don't know what a charter school is a public school in the United States that is sort of run as a private entity. So you get public dollars, public funding, but you get to run the school sort of in your own way, if you will. So it's very different probably from a lot of schools in Europe, but ultimately it was opportunity to really have your own sort of idea put into play, and really be able to do what you want to do in education. And so I jumped at the chance. The money was really good. It was more money than I ever made. And eventually
Wonderful.
my wife joined me. But that was really what led me from leaving Colombia to go to the United States, was this opportunity to help open and run a charter school.
And how did you find that experience? Yeah, was it everything you expected, or was it a little bit of a disappointing experience, being an
Oh,
administrator?
yeah. Well, overall, it was a very positive experience. I mean, it was the biggest professional challenge that I ever had to face and
Mhm.
rise to.
Mhm.
And I think our school was successful, and it continues to be a success. It's still running. It's still
Cool.
running.
Yeah.
And I think I really grew as a professional because I had to manage a team of teachers. I had to manage a team of office staff and prepare students to be successful in school. And that,
Mhm.
of course, involved meeting with the school district, officials from the school district, parents, working with teachers and their challenges. And the focus of the school, besides academics,
Mhm. Mhm.
was tennis, at least tennis and chess.
Oh,
And so,
interesting.
finding teachers that could teach those subjects as well was a challenge. And so it was a really overall great experience, and I did that job for 3.5 years, and so I
Oh,
was
wow.
really proud of my time.
Okay. All right. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we're back online. Um, we were just talking with Rico about his experience as an administrator uh, of a charter school. And at this point, uh, I'm quite interested, Rico, in how you transitioned from being an administrator in a charter school to working in the gig economy. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of, first of all, what inspired you to get into the gig economy, um,
Sure.
and then go on from there? Yeah.
Sure. So, it's kind of funny because I studied business as an undergraduate, and I never really looked at myself as much of an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
But yet, somehow, I always found myself doing certain jobs, whether it was tutoring students in English, tutoring students in Spanish. I was always looking for a way to make some money on the side, right? And as I was working as an administrator, it became very apparent that no matter how hard I worked, I wasn't going to earn any more money. And I was actually earning a decent salary, but I felt very much beholden to, there was just very little work-life balance. And so I started to look at other opportunities of how I could make money. And one of the ways was just literally selling things on eBay. I got into watching videos on YouTube of other people selling a wide range, a hodgepodge, if you will, of different objects online. And I started off just selling a multitude of things: vintage electronics, um, what do you call them? Puzzles, jigsaw puzzles.
Who got you into this eBay sales idea? Was this just a fluke, or was it something that something
It was
that
just
happened?
people.
You
It was
you
just
fell into,
people
yeah.
that I watched online. I mean, in fact, one of the people I used to watch was this guy, the Bonafide Hustler, and he was a guy. He's a guy in Austin, Texas, who really inspired me to, go to garage sales, go to thrift stores, and find products for cheap. It's the old business adage, buy low, sell high. And you would be amazed in the United
Yeah.
States at how much merchandise you can find that is very low in price that you can then sell for a profit. And so I did that for a while. And then eventually I got into selling clothing by watching somebody else. And what I liked about selling clothing was that it wasn't breakable. It was much more lightweight to ship and easier to store. You can put things in your closet, and so selling clothing really became my favorite thing to sell. And with clothing is as large as any retail product is in regards to the size and scope. I mean, you've got women's fashion, men's fashion, children's fashion. So I was mostly into men's fashion,
Okay,
but
cool.
specifically,
So did you buy items based on your own taste for yourself, or did you have a specific model in mind, in your mind, of the customer, the target market, so to speak?
yeah, it's a great question. To be honest, I was still working for the charter school, and I took a trip to San Francisco for a conference. And I'm an early bird, and my colleagues were not, to say the least. And so I was up early
Yeah.
before the conference started, and I went to a couple of thrift stores, and I told myself, you know what, let me just venture into the clothing section. Despite having been selling online for over a year, I never actually ventured into the clothing section. So I eventually went to the clothing section, and I found a North Face down vest
Oh, cool.
for like $8. And you know, I didn't know how much it was worth new or what I could get for it used,
Yeah.
but just the fact that I found it for $8, I was like, wow. I was like, okay, you really, had me right there. So when I came back to Colorado, I sold it on eBay for like $40 or $50. And so I was
Wow.
blown away at the profit margin.
Yes, of
And
course.
it was just clear that there was more profit potential for me based on what I was looking at, what I was interested in selling.
Yeah.
And so I started to go to the clothing section. And so I started to look for brands that were well known, things like North Face, Nike, Levi's, really whatever I could sort of get my hands on. But I still remember very clearly. I'm a big sports fan, and I found this vintage Fila tennis warm-up jacket that was popularized in the 70s by Bjorn Borg, the Swedish uh, tennis player. And
Beyond Bog, my God.
and I found this Fila tracksuit jacket. It's a wool blend for $5. And so once I saw that, I saw the potential for not only being able to outfit myself in garments that I would want to wear, but really to, I've learned that by being more niche, the more niche you are, the more specific you are in whatever you do in a business application
Hmm.
and in professional life as a whole, and in many ways in your own life,
Hmm.
you can become like a subject matter expert. Not that I'm an expert per se on all of vintage clothing, but there are a few items that I really look to sell. And so I love selling vintage sportswear, especially, things like jerseys or tracksuits, things of that nature. And so that's what
And
really moved me into selling clothing and then wanting to really eventually expand more and really maybe at some point create my own website. But it's just been
yeah,
a passion project.
that's the question. Where can the folks find you if they want to check out the wares? You know.
Sure. The easiest way to find me is on Instagram.
Okay.
Everybody has Instagram these days,
Okay.
especially for small businesses. So if you go to instagram.com
Hmm.
slash Ricos Retro,
Yeah. Yeah.
RICOSRETRO, you can find the link to my eBay store and get a sense of the types of products that I sell. And that would be the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, and yes, and we are a follower of Rico's Retro, so we get to see some of his wares on Instagram as well. So definitely um, follow Learneezee, follow Rico's Retro, and we'll all keep in touch through the Instagram community. But of course, that's not the only gig you're into. What other gigs are you working on at the moment, Rico?
Well, the other thing is, again, I've always had a desire to find ways to make money on the side, because, when you're only working for a company, unless you're working in sales, which I've never actually worked in sales, by working harder, you're not earning more money. So I was wanting to find ways that if I worked harder, I could make more money. And so my wife, she eventually joined me in the United States, and we were able to buy a house. And she was insistent on buying a house that would be big enough for us to house visitors, family, friends, etc. And
Sounds
the
like
house
your
was,
wife is a businesswoman. Yeah.
yeah, well, it's kind of funny because she comes from a community in Colombia that's known for being very entrepreneurial, and it was the best decision we ever made. We didn't buy the house thinking about the opportunity to make money by going into Airbnb, but once we started to look at, well, how can we make some more money, we started to look at different ideas, and Airbnb really started to become very popular. And so we've been renting our house on Airbnb now for about the last 3.5 years. And to be honest, that's been some of the easiest money I've ever made, because apart from doing laundry,
Yep.
making the bed, cleaning the bathroom, the money just comes in. Airbnb takes their cut, but
Mhm.
it's been very, very nice to have that extra income each month. I mean, we've been unfortunately, hurt by COVID-19
Yeah,
because
that's taking us to the next topic. Really, is this gig economy only kind of functions if the interaction between you and your customers can still work, especially for Airbnb, and nobody's traveling for vacation or anything like that. What are you guys doing? What are you and your wife doing to make it through this tough period? Yeah.
well, luckily with my vintage clothing business, I had a backstock of a lot of product that wasn't even listed and available for sale. So I've worked diligently on getting almost everything that I have in my garage, my warehouse, if you will,
Yeah.
listed and available for sale. And so that's been super helpful to help make ends meet. I've been lucky enough to be working online. My wife is currently furloughed from her job as a dental hygienist. So I think COVID-19 has really made it very clear that only certain professions are really very safe from having a pandemic hit. People can't go to work. And I think it may even affect how people work going forward. Working remotely might become, sort of the way people start to um, employ people. And especially until there's a vaccine, and who knows what's going to happen. But it's been tough. I'm not going to say it's not tough, but ultimately, having some extra side income has been very, very helpful.
Yes. As you can see, I'm recording from home, and I cannot control uh, the family situation here. But I get your point. Yeah, COVID-19 has changed how life works for all of us, and of course, with the gig economy, we have to also take into account that um, we will get back to normal. There will be a normal again. We just have to hold on until that point comes, right? And then I can see that that's the lesson that you've learned. And now you're saying to have that resiliency built into your lifestyle and into your, different sources of income is the next step for you, right? But any concrete future plans after the crisis at the moment, or is it still open for you to just get back to Ricos Ricos retros, Ricos retros, and then also Airbnb, or is there something else in the pipeline outside of those two?
Well, I mean,
Gigs?
at this point, I think a lot of plans and a lot of goals have been sort of shelved and put on hold just because we don't know how soon we're going to be able to travel. And, in the vintage clothing business and resale industry as a whole, if you can't find products to sell, you're really very limited. Um,
Okay.
and that's kind of why I was really eager to jump into helping you with your Learneezee project with the podcast, because
Cool.
I love doing a lot of different things, and I think that's kind of something that would define my professional career, is that I like doing a lot of different projects simultaneously.
Yes.
I sort of grow bored very easily if I'm always doing the same thing over and over again. With Airbnb, it was easy because all I had to do was just accept or not accept guests. With Rico's
Mm-hmm.
Retro, it's a little bit more labor intensive. You have
Mm-hmm.
to photograph the objects, you have to then store the objects, which requires a whole inventory management system, and then you've got to ship the products. So
Good.
I'm looking for other
Yes.
avenues. And so I've loved teaching English in the past,
Yeah.
and it might be something I go into again, but
Yes.
with more of a focus, I think, in terms of really making language learning more engaging. I think, especially for me, my focus has always been on working with the intermediate to advanced students,
Sure.
and how can I get them to become as fluent as possible. And
Mhm.
so I'm very eager to kind of see where this project goes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. To be quite honest, we'd love to have you as a teacher on Learneezee, but of course, the podcast is your first re-entry into the world of teaching, and we'll use this as a tool to help others. And that comes to the closing of our first episode. We're looking forward to bring you more guests on this podcast or video cast. So that's why we just call it a cast at the moment. And you'll be able to find us to communicate with us over YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Of course, Instagram probably is the best way. Leave your comments there. And I'd like to say, hey, just keep learning easy. And we'll see you hopefully in a couple weeks. You all right? Okay.
All right, Patrick. Well,
Okay.
thanks for having me on. I look
Yeah.
forward to working with you again. And
Yeah.
and for all the listeners, if you have any questions, feel free to email us, message us.
Yes.
I'll be happy to answer those.
Great. Thank you, Rico. All right.
All right. See you, Patrick.
Okay. Ciao.